for Molly?
So after 14 years in this class, I'll get involved. So I'm nervous but excited.
Okay.
Just for everything goes well.
Yeah.
Is it the same company?
Maybe. Anything else? All right. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for allowing us to be here this morning. Cars and feet all got us here, and to gather with your people, study Bible together, to gather around your son's table, to partake. Would help us to focus as we look into the scriptures this morning. Help us understand the things that ought to shape us and mold us, turn us into people that look more like your son Jesus. As we do that, we just want to keep you on in our prayers as his x-rays are coming up next week, as well as his wife's health as her new surgery date approaches. We want to pray for Cindy and Serena as they lost their father. Just pray that have some comfort and comfort their family, and that we can continue to comfort and be there for them. We pray for Todd and the loss of his father, that he's putting him to rest. Just pray for that we continue to support him as he goes through this tragedy as well. Pray for my sister Hannah, her soon-to-be child born very soon. Pray for Jamie, her new job this week, and just so thankful for a successful move. Pray that we can continue to see more of her, and we just pray for those who can't be here this week, that their health would be returned to them soon, or whatever is stopping them from gathering. See them soon. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Mrs. Arnold also asked for prayers for her health. She's always had some heart issues, as long as I've known her, at least. But it sounds like they're becoming more pronounced, and she went to a specialist this week to have some tests and things done. The first question I have is, did anybody come up with any Socratic discussion questions from the material that we reviewed this week? Miss out? That's all right. So the reason that I challenge you to put those together is because it is challenging to put a good Socratic discussion question together.
I do have one.
You have one?
But feel free to discount it.
I will. Not that I will discount it, but I'll agree to.
Read 1 Samuel 27. The level of violence is just profound. It's stark. Over against the peaceful life, the loving kindness that we're supposed to exhibit. No God is a God of loving kindness. But the outflow seems to be a contradiction, at least the world regards it as two different gods. The God of the Old Testament, the God of the New. It's violence in Judaism that day versus the peace of Christianity. We need to be able to answer that. Premises that have been thrown out as two different gods, I reject that. That God has changed somehow. That's against Scripture. God doesn't change. Some said his covenant changes, and therefore that's the way to explain this. And yet it's profound. It's a violent culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we ought to be able at least to give an answer to those that ask about that.
Sure. Yeah, let's hold that question for the second half of the class. And I think we'll have to develop it a little bit more because for a good, so for like an open-ended question is fine, right? And we can probably have a good discussion around it. But one of the challenges of a Socratic discussion leader is to find a thread, something that you understand is, oh, there's some good argument on this side, some good argument on this side, and to help understand everything better by exploring 2 or 3 different options that are available. But we'll get to that because I don't think I quite came up with a good Socratic discussion around that, but I did want us to talk about that. So first of all, let's just talk about the context of 1 Samuel 27, kind of all the way up to 2 Samuel 4. Where are we coming from? What's the story up to this point? Can somebody give us some basics to catch us up to speed of the book of Samuel up to chapter 27? You brave souls out there. This one, Bobby.
At this point, Saul is still acting.
Who's Saul?
Saul was a Benjamite, and he was selected by Samuel through revelation by God to be the first king.
So God wanted a king, and he picked Saul.
The people wanted a king,
Gotcha.
and God granted them their wish, but with reservation. And Saul failed to follow God, and has been acting more like a worldly king than the king that God wanted him to be.
Yeah.
And David has been chosen and anointed by Samuel as the next king. And Saul knows that.
Who's David?
David is the son of Jesse, from the tribe of Judah, and was a shepherd boy, very brave, fought lions and tigers and bears. And he has a heart for God. And he also has a reverence to honor the king, the anointed, Saul.
Okay.
And so he's been wrestling with that because Saul's trying to kill him.
Why is Saul trying to kill David?
It's kind of what kings do when when there's a threat, I guess. But, so David had the chance to kill Saul, but instead cut his robe, and now he's on the run.
Yeah, then he has a second chance to kill him, and he doesn't, and he kind of shames his bodyguards as not protecting the king. And then we get to chapter 27, so they part ways, and the first verse here says, David said to himself, I'm going to perish one day by the hand of Saul. There's nothing better than to escape into the land of the Philistines. Saul then will despair of searching for me anymore in all the territory of Israel, and I'll escape from his hands. Okay, so he goes into a non-extraditionary country who doesn't have good relationships with Israel, happens to be mortal enemies with Israel, in order to hide from Saul. Okay. And now, what I want to draw your attention to is that the next chapters 27 all the way to chapter 1 is one continuous story. Okay? Every single one of these stories is part of the same narrative arc here. That it's the same battle they're talking about. It's the same people. So David joins forces with the Philistines, and he becomes basically like a lord, like a noble for the Philistine king, and then he is sent to Ziklag. That's his little territory that he rules from, and instead of going and attacking the Israelites, which is kind of what the Philistines want him to do, he goes and he raids non-Israelite areas, takes the plunder, gives taxes back to the king, but he just makes sure that nobody lives to tell the tale, and so that he remains in the good graces of the Philistines, but he's also not attacking his own brothers in Judah or Israel. And so he's there, and then they start forming up for battle because they're going to go to battle with Israel. And so that's when Saul realizes he's going to have to go to battle with the Israelites. He then seeks to get some sort of word from the Lord, but the Lord ain't answering. And so he goes and he calls up a medium to call up the spirit of Samuel. And then we go through that whole thing. We can talk about that if you want. I've talked about it in several other classes. I think there's another more interesting things to talk about than that here. Well, maybe not more interesting, but other stuff I want to talk about. I taught that class before, but we can talk about it again. What I really want to draw your attention to is in the next chapter. So Saul he gets an answer from Samuel. You're going to die. Your sons are going to die. Your army's going to be defeated, and you're going to lose the throne. It's going to be given to David. So that's the answer he gets, which is the answer he already had, and he already knew from Samuel when he was alive. Now dead Samuel's telling him the same thing. And so David is forming up on the lines of battle to go to battle with Israel, led by King Saul. So what in your mind, where's the story going? What's going to happen? Yeah. So Saul's on one side of the battle and David's on the other side of the battle. David happens to be with the Philistines, but like we just got this prophecy that he's going to die. Yeah.
Well, first of all, David was hiding in plain sight. He went over to the Philistines knowing that Achish would let him be there because, first of all, he'd already been there before and pretended to be loony, foaming at the mouth. So he knew I can go back and get this guy to let me hang out. So Achish sent him to Ziklag. And so David is hiding in plain sight. Then they're going to have to go combat Israelites and Philistines. And all the other Philistines were like, this is the David that killed 10,000s. We don't trust him. So they complained to Achish, and Achish says, my guys don't trust you. So yeah. I'm sorry, I got to send you back to Ziklag.
So he gets sent away, but before he gets sent away, where's this story going? Like what's going to happen?
Saul is going down, and David's going to ascend. I mean, Samuel already told Saul, and then you don't really want to talk about it. Saul goes to the median and tries to outsmart her until he says, bring up Samuel. Immediately she knows who he is. And Samuel says the same thing. I already told you the kingdom is going to be wrestled away from you. So Saul already knew going into the combat with the Israelites that he was probably going to perish. We know what happened. He was injured. Kind of like the other old Testament story where the guy got pierced, the king got pierced on the side of his shoulder and ended up perishing. Same exact scenario, except Saul's like, run me through to his assistant because they're going to come and defile me. And his assistant said, you're the king. I'm not doing that. And so Saul committed suicide. Then his servant committed suicide. And they still came and defiled his body and his sons, all of them. And David knows at this point, now is my time. I'm going to ascend.
Yep. And so what I'm trying to press on here is, as I look at this battle unfolding, there's two pathways really for David if he goes and he commits to this battle, right? He's either going to go and he's going to fight and he's going to kill Saul and his army, right? And if you're the Philistines and you have a group of Israelites, you have this 600-man force under David, are you sending them in first?
Well, David wanted to be at the back of the charge. He wanted to get him and 600 men to go in last.
Mm-hmm.
And the generals did not like that idea at all.
Yeah. Why not?
They didn't trust David.
Yeah.
I think the irony is rich here, that when he turns himself over to the Philistines, the king, who knows very well who David is, says, I've got two of the top champions of the Hebrew children here. One of them I've got under my thumb, David, and the other one I have at the prong or the tip of my spear, Saul. I got both of them where I want him. And not only do I have David where I want him, but I also put him in the hometown of Goliath. And if you know anything about Gath, the hometown of Goliath has banners, billboards, and street signs everywhere about Goliath, 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 Goliath. And so if you're going to put him under any kind of security, where do you send David? Stay in this house with your 300 men in Goliath's hometown. David's going nowhere. You know, he may have all kinds of plans for himself, but the king of Achish thinks that he has the upper hand both on David and on Saul. And God's going to reveal he's got his hand on neither of them. So.
Yeah, and David's been tricky this whole time, right? He's
Thinks he's been tricked.
well,
He's not fooling anybody.
you don't think David fooled him? I mean, it seems like he did. The story tells us that he
It would be
that
okay.
the general, or sorry, Achish says, yeah, David's here and he's good to go. And then it's only these other people who haven't heard what David's done.
It would be okay. I would go along with your conclusion if he hadn't pulled 300 men along with him. A nut job does not wander into town with 300 people behind him.
So the time he acts crazy, that's a different story. Okay,
It's part of his history.
right.
So he's a wild card the whole time.
Okay.
You think that David is in command at all here?
Seems like David is a formidable warrior with a formidable force that's going to do something in this battle. And I just want you to challenge. I just want to. So what I'm trying to drive at is notice what do you think David is going to do in this battle? You know, there's what the Philistines think he's going to do, but has David shown that he is unwilling to attack Saul and his people? Yeah, time and time again, he hides and he makes sure that doesn't happen. And so if he's brought into battle with the Philistines, is he going to rescue Saul, keep him alive, fight on his behalf? Right? He's going to rout the Philistines like he always does, and he's going to do his David thing. And so God prevents that. Why? Why does he prevent it? Why does God prevent David from saving Saul in battle? It's not a small, it's not a large, the medium, right? The medium in the last chapter, he went and consulted, right? He's doing all this stuff that's well outside the things he's supposed to do.
It's against the law.
Yeah. And so he goes and he does these things. He's already lost the kingdom, and so Samuel just like, this just sealed your fate, man. You know, tomorrow, that's the end. Sons, they're all gone. And so David goes from being in this position where he could potentially save Saul. Like, that's what Saul needs, right? Saul needs David. Saul needs David and his 600 men. No, and there's no, he definitely doesn't. He does, right? We know that he does. And this whole time we've seen that he's been protecting Israel, and despite Saul's persecuting him. And so Saul ends up in battle without the man that he needs and his force that he needs who could save him. Does that make sense?
I think the thing that I always wondered about was David really supposed to not kill Saul every time he didn't kill Saul? And in his mind, he thought he's the anointed, but God told Saul it was already it had already been wrested from his hand and given to David, and David's been put in this position where he had opportunity to kill him, but he wouldn't. And I always wondered, was that God's will, or was that David's understanding of God's will? I wonder about that, but
Yeah. What do we think?
I don't think King David, he looked at King Saul as the anointed. And even in the end, when King Saul got terribly wounded in the war, and then a soldier told him to stick that sword through him and kill me. And I believe that the soldier did stick that sword through him, and then he went running back to King David, letting him know, hey, David's asking what puts all this commotion. He said, I just killed the king, King Saul. What did King David do? Didn't he kill him?
He had him killed.
He had him killed. Through all the whole time, he didn't want to kill the anointed. He had a lot of love for King Saul, but King Saul was totally jealous of him. You see what I'm saying? And King Saul was the one who banned witchcraft, but he's the one that went to the witch of Endor and had her rise, the witch said, you and your 2 sons are going to be down here with me, am I correct?
Yeah.
It's just interesting because it seems like it's almost a triple threat that David was in the right position, that he could have been an ambush against the forces. David was also in the right position that when the generals didn't trust him and didn't trust that he wasn't, he's like, that's you guys, that's not me, I didn't. And then I think the third thing, obviously, is like the decision there protected David from having to go against his people, and protected him from, like, he had integrity in the whole thing, that like it preserved that. So the same thing to Bobby's question, I think all of those opportunities to kill Saul where he could have and he didn't, preserve that integrity of like, hey, I'm just here doing God's work, and I don't want anybody to ever think it was me that went off a tangent and decided to do my own thing. And ultimately it ends up being, Saul killing himself, and he's like, I could have, but I didn't. But I think that it's really important to see that it was kind of a triple threat there, where multiple things were happening at the same time, with him being removed from the battlefield, that he didn't have to fight his people. And then it allowed Saul to defend himself for the mistakes that he made and the wrong choices he made. But David was kind of able at the end of it to kind of put his hands up and be like, hands are clean. I have clean hands here. It wasn't me.
Yeah, and that's one of the core patterns that we see time and time again with David, is that he's unwilling to kill the Messiah, not because he has any love for Saul. I mean, Saul's been trying to murder him this whole time. But it's the fact that as another of the Lord's anointed, It's not right that you would pursue this pattern of killing the Lord's anointed, right? That you're just wishing death upon yourself if you're the one that's been chosen by God to do this task. John?
Yeah, maybe he would try and save Saul, but in just a few chapters, he has no problem going to war with Israel. Goes and kills a bunch of them. He doesn't seem to view the people the same way he views Saul. The people are God's anointed. Doesn't seem to bother. He has no business being over with a bunch of Philistines. It seems like to me anyway, in chapter 27 is a turning point for him. It starts out with now he's afraid of Saul, so where does he go? To a neighboring nation, make political alliances. Isn't this the thing that's going to curse Israel all the way through until Babylon comes? They're going to go to other nations and act like, make political alliances to try and save themselves instead of trusting God. David doesn't say things like he says in 27 verse 1 earlier in his life. He just sticks out there and he waits. He trusts God to protect him, but Samuel's gone now, and it seems like it's just a turning point in his life. From here down on out, to me, it's just downhill all the way. He does end up in Jerusalem as king of all Israel. He has to go to war with Israel to do it. It's making alliances with nations round about, which number one aren't supposed to be there, and number two, they're not supposed to make any alliances. But it's to his benefit. It seems like from here on out, he's freewheeling it. He's doing what's right in his own eyes without Samuel, to me. 27 seems like the place to me where it just turns. It doesn't seem like he has any trouble going to war against the Israelites with the Philistines. It's going to serve his purposes. Maybe I misread him, but maybe he would have tried to save Saul, but he's not. I don't know that he just doesn't have a prophet to go to now, but he seems to be unguided now, to me, the rest of his life until Nathan and a few specific instances.
Any other thoughts?
It's just hard to separate loyalty or and self-preservation versus loyalty and friendship. I think it's hard to look at that alliance and see it the same thing as like, me and Thomas aren't good, so I'm going to Ryan, and me and Ryan are now going to be against Thomas. That's a very different alliance than Thomas has got a gun, he's threatening me, so I'm going to run into Ryan's house and hide. And there's a lot more to it than that story, but I think that thinking about how an alliance works, there's a difference between being scared and seeking refuge somewhere else versus going to them and being like, we're friends now and we're good and I want an alliance with you out of partnership. David, it's such a unique alliance here that David was terrified, and so he sought true, it was an incorrect alliance, but he sought protection from this outskirting neighboring people and the Philistines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just encourage as we think through the text, pay attention to the details, right? We're given these details for a reason. So if we're told that he doesn't go, like he specifically doesn't attack the Israelites, like there's a reason we were told that. And maybe it's not because he's unwilling to ever attack Israelites, as we'll see later as the civil war kicks off. But that's an important detail that the author wants us to know for this narrative arc, right? And it ought to contribute to our understanding of what David is doing there and how it plays into the whole of Saul's end, Saul's demise. Right?
And then the soldier that said that he killed Saul lied. Saul killed himself. Remember, he took the sword and killed himself.
Yeah, it's a confusing little passage there. It's not clear if the Amalekites lying, or maybe he did finish him off, or what exactly happened.
Coming back to David's alliance, we've all heard the cliche, frenemies, and keep your enemies close. Also, the question was earlier, did he outsmart Achish or not? When he went to Negev, he went out 3 different times and wiped out total populations and took all the plunder and gave it to his old allies back in Israel. So he was still was hiding out in the with the Philistines. And then coming back to the loyalty part, not only what Lolo said about the plunderer bringing the crown of Saul back and claiming that, yeah, I ran him through, and David was like, you had the nerve to take out God's anointed king and had him killed. And then a little farther, when the two guys took out
Ishbosheth.
yeah, same thing. When they came back and were bragging about, we took out this guy that was, part of the people trying to take you out, and David, same thing. This guy was related to Saul, sleeping in his bed, and you went and killed him, and David had both them killed too. So it seems really obvious that David was loyal 100% to Saul and his family.
Let's get one more comment, and we'll move on to the.
I agree with Jan. The loyalty to Saul really stems from his loyalty to God, because he recognized that God was the ultimate decision maker, the ultimate arbiter, and an ascendancy to power was not going to be through violence perpetrated by David. He did not believe in a violent transfer of power. Either, when the opportunities came to him in innocence, in a quiet location, or on the battlefield, he did not believe in a violent transition of power. And certainly, I'm not trying to mind read God, but this is the first transition from one king to the next king. And how inappropriate on a cosmic scale would it be if this were on a violent level instead of the plan of God, the way it was ultimately played out.
Yeah, and it's interesting to phrase it that way, because it's in the midst of like a blender of humans, right? Like this is just such a violent episode of all these people doing all these horrific things to each other. And yet in the middle of it, David is not willing to lift his hand against the Lord's anointed. And I think that just speaks volume to his character. And one of the things that, if you walk away from the book of Samuel with anything, it's that David respected the God's anointed. He trusted that the Lord knew what he was doing when he put Saul on the throne, even though he knew that this guy wasn't the guy, and he wasn't able to do things in the way that God wanted him.
Yeah, that was David's touchstone. Certainly Saul could have killed him a number of times, actually tried to kill him a number of times. And David acknowledged that was within Saul's hands, but it was not going to be something that David was ever going to initiate himself.
And David, to varying levels, trusted that God was going to care for him. So yeah, it's a very interesting story. For the last few minutes of class, I just want to look at this strange event here. It's in 2 Samuel chapter 2. And so, just some quick background. David is made king of the tribe of Judah. Okay, so he reigns from Hebron, which is south of Jerusalem. That's kind of the capital of the territory of Judah. And then Ishbosheth, who's one of Saul's sons, is made the king, and he is reigning in Saul's stead. But there's this conflict, right? Because David has a claim to the throne, and Ishbosheth is a claim to the throne. Ishbosheth, Ish in Hebrew means man. Boshet is shame. Okay, so I don't know if his name was Man of Shame. Maybe it was. It might be that the fact that he decided to try to overthrow David, that he kind of got renamed in the history books. Most people don't name their son Man of Shame, especially when names are very powerful and meaningful. Renamed. Yeah, I think that might be what's going on here. He kind of got renamed because of his rebellion against David. regardless, Ishbosheth is the one who decides to go to war with David. And then we have this thing, starting verse 12, they decide to kind of meet, and it almost seems like they're going to try and come to terms. And so I'm just going to read this. Now Abner, the son of Ner, went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon with the servants of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul. And Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and the servants of David went out and met them by the pool of Gibeon. And they sat down on one side of the pool and on the other side of the pool. Then Abner said to Joab, "No, let the young men arise and hold a contest before us." And Joab said, "Let them arise." They both arose, went over by count, 12 for Benjamin and Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and 12 for the servants of David. Each one of them seized his opponent by the head and thrust his sword in the opposite side, so they fell down together. Therefore, that place was called Helkath Hazurim, which I believe means field of swords or something like that, which is in Gibeon. That day the battle was very severe, and Abner and the men of Israel were beaten before the servants of David. What on earth did we get that story for? What does that mean? Why do we get this very strange encounter? That's all we hear about it, and then we go right into the battle with Spear, and David won. So I know I just said don't ask open-ended questions, but this is my open-ended question for today, which kind of deals with this violence, right? This incredible amount of violence here.
There's a scene in the movie Patton where Patton says he wishes he and Rommel could just go out. Patton wished he and Rommel could go out and get in their tanks and do battle. And the outcome of that battle would decide the whole war. That's what a battle man he was, or what a man of war he was.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to, and this looks like deciding the Civil War on a small scale.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing that David did with the Philistines, right? Champions battling it out so that not everybody has to die. But what happens?
This puzzles me too, because David had taken an oath to protect the family of Saul, right? But now this is going on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have this kind of troubling scene. Why do we have this? Think about it in kind of bigger patterns of the narrative overall. 12 men. They fight, they kill, everybody kills each other. Doesn't fix anything. So we got 12 tribes. Okay. 12 tribes fighting against 12 tribes. What's going on with this story?
Sometimes think in strange ways, but you're hesitant to fight.
You're hesitant to fight one another?
Israel's hesitant to go to civil war.
Okay.
So, just be totally harebrained, but in my suspicion, they really, you got one of them sitting on one side and one of them sitting on the other. Probably don't want a civil war. Joab knows Abner, Abner knows Joab. So it kind of starts slow. Soldiers are wont to do. Lots of jabs going back and forth. You better stop this, so they pick champions. And then that's it. Once the blood starts flowing, that's it. It's on. And away they go. My personal guess is they're just very hesitant to have civil war. For all the things that Moses said about the people. But it doesn't last long, because as soon as the blood starts flowing, it's over and away we go.
Yeah. I think that's this.
It goes on for a long time, according to chapter 3, verse 1.
Yeah, and hopefully we can see here as this drama between Abner, Joab, and their siblings plays out. It just feels like a very personal introduction to this civil war, right? It's not they did this battle, lost 10,000 men, did this battle, this person. No. The brother of the general is pursuing him on foot. He says, "Stop pursuing me. If I kill you, I can't look your brother in the, or your father in the eye." Right? It's this whole thing. Like, how could I kill my brother? And it's brought here, just opened up right in front of us. 12 men grabbing each other's hair, stabbing each other. Everybody dies. Right? It's just a horrible image of fratricide. Right? This when civil war happens, it's brutal and it's bloody and it's just a horror show all around.
The people are lost.
Yeah.
They're just like the nations around them. They think just like them, they go to war just like them. They're petty. They settle their throne descendancy disputes. They're not. What here looks like God's people? In what way do they look anything like the people they were supposed to be? They're lost. They're gone. God's just keeping his word and doing his thing through them, but they don't look any different than the Philistines or anybody else at this point. They're just, the covenant is irrelevant to them. Well, purpose, they're just like everybody else, which is what they ask for the king. We want to be like all the nations around us. Well, they are.
Yeah. And what I want you to do is pay attention to Joab as we go through this, right? Joab is the general for David, and he is going to kind of grow in power and ability and following, and it really, by the end of this whole thing, it really seems like a Frankenstein, like Dr. Frankenstein kind of problem. Like David's created this monster, and he can't, he ends up killing David's own son, and just can't, Solomon has to end up killing this guy because he's kind of created this thing.
Thomas, this also kind of plays back to God's original prohibition and warnings against this. That I don't imagine God being, patronizing up in heaven somewhere, being like, "I told you kings weren't ideal. There's going to be an issue. If you want kings, we can do it, but there's going to be problems." But he can kind of rest on his laurels, obviously, in an almighty deity standpoint of this is what kings, people become territorial, and people become possessive, and there's splits, and there's wars. I didn't want you guys to have kings. You wanted kings. So it's interesting to just think about the dynamic of the plan of leadership of what God wanted and how God wanted to rule over his people, and then how the people responded to that. And then now, as John points out, they're in chaos. You're looking at alliances and not who God appointed, and it's bonkers to read and to think about the "I told you so's" that could be there, but obviously the God we serve isn't patronizing. But it reminds me of a parent that tells a kid not to stick a penny in a light socket, and then when they get zapped, they're like, "I told you not to do it. I told you you'd get hurt." So
yeah, and it's just a very realistic view of the whole political process of kings and kingdoms, and so yeah, it's definitely well worth meditating on, thinking about all these challenges, especially as we kind of enter the home stretch of our election season here. How do we participate in these systems that aren't ideal, while striving and looking towards God's king, right? Because God does have a king, right? He does set up a kingdom. His solution is a king. It's just not this kind of king, and not the kind of king that's going to take and grasp and hold on with this kind of unfaithfulness in the long run. So next week we're going to be working through 2 Samuel 5 through 9. So a little bit shorter reading next week. Hopefully you'll have some time to come up with some great Socratic discussion questions. And it's very, very interesting material around David's as he unites the kingdom and kind of becomes this king. He makes this new covenant with God, or kind of extends the covenant with God into this kingship in this kind of new way. So hopefully it'll be a good discussion around those ideas. Thanks.